Hey YouTube. Sorry about the glare on the glasses. I'm trying to figure this out. I just got off the phone with a client of mine who's been he's constantly stuck in this, how can I optimize what I'm doing? What is the best course of action that I can take right now to accomplish all the goals that I'm trying to accomplish? The reason that I really want to talk about this, I think primarily, is because this is probably the biggest thing that I have struggled with in my life and in my career and in trying to figure out what I should do next. So things were simpler when I, was living with my parents and just got out of high school and going to college, because I knew that all I had to do was go to college and train. And all I was doing was, trying to chase powerlifting dreams, and I wanted to be the strongest dude I could be, and I didn't really care about school. It was just a place I had to be. I didn't have to think about optimizing things quite as much. But then later on, when I started to think, okay, well, if I really want to be better at powerlifting, what's the best way to lift? That was one of the worst workouts I've ever written. It was like an 8x3 snatch, 8x3 back squat, 8x3 bench press. And I was just exhausted, not getting stronger at all, just getting worn out, just getting weaker. And it's counterintuitive, right? Because you're lifting heavy, but you're not lifting heavy enough to actually put more strength gains on. And all you're doing is just beating down your nervous system. So it was a terrible idea. And the reason that it was terrible was because I knew just enough to be dangerous. That's a phrase that we like to use at iFast, and people in general. You can use it in all sorts of different situations. Let's say, so my new project is programming. So if somebody knows just enough programming to be dangerous, which is probably me right now, you can start to throw in a bunch of code that doesn't run very efficiently and doesn't make very much sense when somebody's reading it, and maybe is actually slow, maybe barely gets the job done, but doesn't work in every browser that somebody looks at it in. There's a lot of, and all that does is when you pass that project on, you give that person who's receiving the workload, you give them extra workload, because maybe you're not commenting in your program, and so nobody knows what the hell you're trying to do. Same kind of thing with training. Like, I knew that lifting for triples, doubles, and singles, that's what it was. I said 8x3, but it was like 3-3, 2-2-2, 1-1-1, or something like that. Lifting for 1 to 3 reps is supposed to get me stronger, right? So more is better. And that's where knowing that lifting for 1 to 3 reps is challenging for strength, but doing it ad nauseum is not always the greatest idea. You're not accumulating any sort of musculoskeletal fatigue. It's purely nervous system, and in my case, with the technique that I was using, it was purely joints supporting me and then waiting until my muscle could shorten underneath them. So that's a bit of a ramble. So the topic today is, what is the best way to do blank? So we talked about optimizing, and I talked with my client recently about this. We just got off the phone, and he's frustrated because he's trying to accomplish stuff, but he's doing the opposite things. And I'm not writing his programs, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes who might be writing his programs. But for him, with my experience with him, it's there's a lot of time and energy and focus spent on what is the best way to do blank, but not a lot of energy spent on doing that thing, right? So optimizing can be very distracting for people, and this is why I feel like I can talk about this, because I just made, when one of the first big website projects that I had. I spent 6 months planning it out because I didn't know anything about it, and it made me feel more comfortable with it, and now I understand what's going on. But 6 months is way too long. Now I can make a website in like 5 minutes. And I'm not even kidding, right? As long as everything's selected, like WordPress does everything for you. All I was doing was prolonging the inevitable. In the startup tech culture, they talk about a minimum viable product. So minimum meaning it's not as good as it could be, but realizing that it never really will be. There's no such thing as perfection. You're always chasing perfection, right? There's no such thing as being done. You just give up. So keeping that in mind, I still want to optimize what I'm doing, right? I don't want to just do a bunch of shit, essentially. I don't want to waste everyone else's time. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to put something out there that's not helpful for anyone, but it doesn't need to be perfect from the training standpoint. So what's the best way to put on muscle mass? So I need to be a certain amount of lean so that I can have enough insulin sensitivity to really use it to my advantage when I'm starting to gain weight and in my caloric surplus. And that was this specific scenario here. And what I will say is that, yeah, kinda, if you got all your stuff together, that works, but don't put too much of a priority on that. We talked about adaptive thermogenesis. So when somebody loses a lot of weight, this is the best example I have. When somebody loses a lot of weight and they maybe 2 months, they've lost 20 pounds, and then they pretty much stop losing weight. So the body adapts to this new set point that they've been giving themselves. So and you just think from a physics standpoint, there's fewer calories to burn, right? It takes fewer calories to live now that I'm 20 pounds lighter. So now what I was doing the last 2 months is not enough. So taking that in consideration, we can just kind of push forward. Maybe we need to, instead of backing off, maybe we need to turn it up. Maybe we need to steer into the skid a little bit. And that's kind of like the main point that I want to make here is, you don't have to think, oh, well, now it's not working, so maybe I need to fix it. What you were doing was working. Just keep doing it. Or if something hasn't been working, maybe you need to do it harder. That is a completely different physiologic stimulus. It seems counterintuitive because you're kind of in that direction already, so it's really easy to steer away from it and think, oh, well, maybe I was off base here. But I would encourage some people by saying, one of the quotes from my good friend Jay Chung that has always stuck with me is, people aren't as fragile as you think. And that's the pot calling the kettle black, but I love you, Jay. But, you see some SEAL training or whatever for the Navy. That stuff is really, really difficult and really, really taxing. But those people are alive. Like, they make it through it. PT stuff. People survive, people thrive, and they get better, and they get more resilient from it. Sometimes you just need to try a little bit harder. There's this podcast that Tim Ferriss did with Dorian Yates. Dorian Yates is a famous bodybuilder from a couple decades ago now. And he just said, I'll link to it below, but he just said, man, my legs were sore for 15 years because he's just busting his balls. Like, you could talk about drugs, you could talk about, not having, alienating the rest of his life, but he decided that this is my purpose, this is what I need to do, this is what I was meant to do, and he just went for it. you know, can you imagine? Like, I've had sore legs before, but not for 15 years. I mean, that is prioritizing something. So, you know, if I want to learn how to program, I'm going to spend 8 hours a day programming. 8 hours a day of dedicated work, dedicated deep focus work. Great book on deep focus and deep work is called Deep Work. Spoiler alert. Deep Work, and it's from Cal Newport. I'm reading it right now. I'll link to that below too. Really, really good. Then on this topic, so another sidetrack. Cal Newport has another book called So Good They Can't Ignore You, which is after a quote from Steve Martin, who somebody asked him, how did you get noticed? He just said, be so good they can't ignore you. His point is that, you know, for me growing up, I've been trying to optimize, like, I could do anything with my life. What is it that I should be doing with my life? And people would say, follow your passion. You know, what are you passionate about? Just go to school for that, and then you can dedicate yourself primarily to that. And like, it makes a lot of sense, but only if you know what your passion is. And the big point that Cal Newport makes in this So Good They Can't Ignore You book is, you don't know. Like, how are you supposed to know what you're passionate about? So do more deep work, learn more skills, create what he calls career capital, and then you can focus on things, right? And then you can think, man, I am really good at this, and I enjoy being successful at this. I enjoy doing it now. And then you've selected yourself to doing that. If you think you want to be a writer, just start writing. Don't worry about a Scrivener or what sort of notepad paper you should be writing on. Just whatever is next to you, open up Notepad in your computer, which, you know, if you don't have a computer, just write it on a piece of paper. And just write. If you don't like writing, you're not going to be a good writer. I hope that isn't a facetious oversimplification, but what is the best way to do X? Think of a good way. Don't think of the best way. What is a good way to do X? And then do it.